This is exclusive interview on AD4 TV radio. I am Tunde Hassan. Welcome. Near-death encounters usually excite the human essence. Such encounters are most defining. Living to tell the story is a thing to relish. My guest on exclusive interview, Mr. Peter Onuka, an airplane crash survivor, joins me in a moment to share their experience. After this background report.
Near-death encounters usually excite the human essence. Such encounters are most defining, and living to tell the story is a thing to relish. In the course of life on earth, individuals may experience or listen to the literal or figurative phrase, "out of the jaws of death," drives home this point. For instance, while plying a busy road and a sudden brake failure skids a vehicle into a nearby ditch, airbags released and occupants exit unscathed could be easily termed as a near-death encounter. Over time, circumstances arise to be grateful for surviving intense close-call situations. Shock is sometimes a psychological reaction triggered by surviving a near-death encounter. There may be a constant or intermittent mental replay of the situation. In the aftermath, it is commonplace to hear individuals say, "My life flashed before my eyes," whilst relaying the details and severity of the circumstance they had survived. Peter Onuka, an Abuja resident, a researcher, life coach, pastor, and trainer, encountered such a near-death situation, having survived a close-to-call plane crash October 29, 2006, but walked away to tell the story. He is our guest on exclusive interview.
It's good to have you join us to tell what ordinarily should have been an unfortunate situation, but you're here to say the whole story. You were involved in a crash October 29th, 2006. Take us through what really happened.
Well, it was a fateful Sunday morning, October 29, 2006, early flight from Lagos going to Sokoto via Abuja, where we took off. It was a raining day, very early in the morning. It was an 8 o'clock flight. We took off from Abuja. We landed safely in Abuja. Took off from Lagos, landed safely in Abuja without any issue. And so some passengers came down, some came in. And in that incident was also the former Sultan of Sokoto, who was Mesido, his son, the senator, and some of his entourage came into the plane.
On the way to Sokoto?
On the way to Sokoto. And where the rain was on, all through the way from Abuja, from Lagos to Abuja, the rain was somehow on. When we got down, the rain was still drizzling, but at this point, without any strength of heaviness. So then finally, when we were to take off, where there was a delay, I think it was a point of taking off. I think there was an instruction to the pilot to probably hold back, and he head back for 30 minutes or so, or a little more than that. And so we were quite gisting right in the plane. I remember leaving my seat behind, joined my other colleagues in front, gisting. We gisted, we were there gisting until the pilot announced it was time
for flight to take off.
So my friend came down from the back to take his seat and her seat rather, and I went back to my seat at the back. And we took off. We began to gain altitude. As we were gaining altitude from the plane began to struggle. Turbulence was against, the plane, and
it was beyond the regular turbulence, flight turbulence.
Yes, for me, I was quite familiar with flying at that time. So I've seen quite a number of
turbulence like that.
turbulence a lot. So it wasn't something so serious. I wasn't thinking of plane crash at all. But maybe what might be different was that I'm not sure I have experienced taking off and having a turbulent situation while taking off. I'm not sure I've experienced that, but that was the case. It was still trying to gain altitude, and so as he was struggling, I remember a friend of mine not too far from me also.
All that within the Abuja environment.
Was within Abuja.
You hadn't gone too far.
No, we hadn't gone too far. I think it was between 5 minutes of taking off, but not the speed of a plane. And then about 5 minutes of taking off. That's when we crashed. I remember vividly looking at her, and she's Esther, and so I was looking at her the way she grabbed her seat, and I was smiling that when we are balanced, I will make some jokes out of that. And suddenly I noticed a very sharp descent, very sharp one, and so I closed my eyes. Well, the next thing I heard was that bow
on the ground.
On the ground, we came down, hit, and as we hit the floor, the plane went up, came back the second time, back,
bounced up and down again,
and came down the second time. The second time, it divided into two, straight, and the front side of it went on with speed.
Were you at the one moving or the one stationary?
The one stationary. That's the one on the back. And well, the few people who survived actually on the one stationary. That went on, with speed and thrust into a tree. It was actually a tree that ended up, stopping it. And so the villagers at that point, the governor of Kogi State, his three daughters were on board. His three daughters were on board in that flight also. They start close to me. I was a bit central to those behind, and we were all about the same as is at the back. I think 8 of us or 9, and we were about the same. Then the plane was it had about 105 passengers.
So the one that remained stationary left how many passengers behind, and the one that sped off?
Well, it was a full plane. So it was a full plane. The capacity of the plane was about that 105. And so we are 105.
So give or take about 60 or so.
60 or so. Let's say about 60 or so were in the front, and maybe about 40 something were behind. That way. And but at the end, out of those of us behind, I think 8 or 9 of us survived. So among which was I think Idris, Ibrahim Idris, yes, that's the name of the governor then. 3 of his daughters were on board. And when it happened, when it happened and we got those behind of us, I think about 2 people were able to get up. I think they were coppers. Yes, the Esters. They were both bearing Esters. I think they do. One was able to get up, and the other one had a little
injury,
which was not serious at all. When she got up, and one of the Kogi State governor's daughters also got up. And when she got up, she was calling for help so that they could get her sisters out. So one of the girls, one of the Esters, of the 2 Esters, she was quite familiar with me. She turned and was like, "Peter, please help." So that's when she realized that I couldn't get up. And she saw she could see my consciousness.
Were you conscious?
Yes.
What was your situation physically?
Physically, I was okay. I wasn't injured on the major except, I had some burns because as the fire went to sparks start coming up a bit and everything. I had a bit of burn on my arm, but at that point my eyes were open. I was semi-conscious, so I could really not. There was no strength in that. So when she called me, she now saw that I wasn't responding. So that's when she realized that there seems to be a bit of an issue. So then they tried to help. Then about this time, the villagers came in, and when they came in, they were a bit afraid to come inside the plane because of the smoke already starting, showing up. But they encouraged them, and they were able to come in and help me out. So the villagers came in and helped a few of us who were a bit conscious, but quite a number were not conscious, and quite a number died behind there. So I think if I remember vividly, about 2 of us were guys, the rest were ladies.
Who survived? Okay, now, onto this, thank God you're here to tell the story. I'm really happy you went through, you came out of that with all the others. Now, between the time it happened and the villagers coming, was there any, what would be your assessment of the response time for state authorities who would have ordinarily have the responsibility to track the plane as it took off from Abuja on the way to Sokoto and then come to your rescue?
Of course, actually, a lot will have survived if the response was quick enough. Well, I don't know how long it took them before they could detect that the plane was missing. I think the process was to detect that the plane is missing and then declare it missing. So before they set out to try to trace. So, but it took time because actually it wasn't, a lot of people, they were screaming. People were screaming, so it wasn't the direct impact of the drop that actually killed a lot of people. Of course, it injured people. Some people were a bit, unconscious as a result of the impact.
And of course, naturally people go into shock.
So people couldn't get up of their own to walk out in that situation, but they were screaming. They were, right? So, and of course, at this time, because the wiring of the plane has, it's the big sparks start coming bit and bit, smoke start coming out here and there. And like I remember when they brought me out, because I was working with the airline at that time, and so I had the training a little bit, the very week before the crash, and part of the training was, they were a part of it where we were doing something about plane crash. So certain things, how they do, what happens, what the likely response if a plane crash in water.
So you had some bit of knowledge for rescue operation.
So immediately I came out, they brought me out. In that subconscious state of mind, I started telling them, say, move me away from the plane. This plane will
explode.
Move me away, it will explode. And so, as a result of that information, every other person who survived also went away from it. And within a few minutes from then, the one in the front went totally, exploded totally, nothing left.
With everybody in it.
So that's actually what caused the death of a lot of people, not really the impact of the fall.
The reason I asked at the beginning, between the time you started experiencing turbulence and what eventually happened, is to establish the distance so that we know if the response of the rescue operation could have helped the situation.
Actually, it could, because the distance was just the outskirts of Abuja. We're still within Abuja territory. So it wasn't something far into the bush or something that way. But what I'm not sure of is how quickly the control tower was able to detect that the plane was off course to declare it missing. So that's the difference, the major thing. That aspect I don't know, but it took time. It wasn't something 30 minutes to, because the explosion was not something that happened immediately also.
Okay, let's look at you as a person after it happened, and of course you that you're telling the story, you got out of it. How did it impact you from then till now? How has it impacted you? Your attitude to life and the general...
Massively. It had impacted my life massively. For me, it was like the turning point. What I mean by turning point was, at this junction, my focus on my drive in life was a bit different. I've been brought up in a Christian home, and I had some inclination to certain things, the direction of God in my life. But then, having the privilege of being brought up under a pastor, my dad is a pastor and at the same time a professor in the University of Ibadan. And I saw, especially the early part of his life where he was strictly a pastor. I saw some of those difficulties he went through, some of those challenges. And when I was coming out, before I came out of the university, I was clear about that ministry was my direction in life. And I just have to go into ministry. That was sure. But then when I looked at that situation, what he went through, what things we went through, it wasn't just the thing I wanted to do at that time. So my direction was to go make money and have enough money. Then I can come back, do a bit of ministries one way or the other. That was clear direction. And so really, I was pursuing that with everything in me. But at this junction, when it happened, the question I asked myself, why will God save me? I wasn't better than those who died. Not in any way. They were Christians who died.
Among them, yeah.
Among them. Oh. So it wasn't a function that because of my religion, that's why I was alive. It wasn't so. It was just a pure act of God's goodness and mercy towards me. Then at that point, I needed to sit down and ask myself, will I want to continue the course that I have chosen or align myself to He who created me? So at this point, I began to make a shift. There was a shift in my mind. My perspective changed. How I see life, how I see my purpose, what I ought to do, of what impact will my life make up. If I have died, that was all.
Yeah, 2006.
Yes, sir.
Now we're in 2021. 15 years down the line, you're telling the story. Yes, we'll return to continue engaging on this very touchy story of surviving a plane crash. Mr. Peter Onuka has been with us. We'll return to continue our discussion.
There's a wind of change blowing over Nigeria, and it's coming from the Tertiary Education Trust Fund. If you want to find out how TED Fund is bringing the Nigerian government, industry, and the academia together to drive a new knowledge economy, tune in to this station every Wednesday at 8 p.m. for TED Fund, The Paradigm Shift. It's informative, it's innovative, and it's exciting. TED Fund, The Paradigm Shift, proudly produced by 84 TV Radio.
Welcome back. Exclusive interview on 84 TV Radio. I still have in the studio with me Mr. Peter Onuka, resident here in Abuja, a life trainer, a pastor, who survived a plane crash and is here to tell the story. That's not something a lot of people have had the privilege to be able to do. Thanks again for being with us.
You're welcome, sir.
Between 2006, when this happened, and today, you've told us about how it became a turning point in your life. And but in general, has it stopped you from maybe flight travels? That's number one. Number two, rolling back to what happened and what life could have been saved if there had been proper, effective response operation. Are you comfortable? Are you okay with the state of facilities in this country for air travel, as it were, currently?
Well, the first one is that I remember the first time I had to travel it was from Ibadan to Abuja. My God. I had not been that scared. No, that's not the first time. Because from Abuja back to Lagos after...
That's after the crash.
After the crash. So somehow that was a bit massive in terms of impact. But maybe because of the situation still going on, because it was just some few days after, maybe I didn't see that impact of it. But I remember
you
that the
did
next one,
travel
immediately
again by flight back to Lagos.
Back to Lagos. And so, but I knew that after that happened like some 4 or 5 days after the crash. So maybe because of the situation, I didn't feel so much of that impact. I was more of grateful. Gratitude. My gratitude was just going to God at that point. And so maybe I didn't feel the impact of entering, but some 3 months down the line, I now needed to travel from Ibadan to Abuja. I got into the plane, and as soon it was time to take off, my God, my whole being was shaking. I was like, God, But one beauty of it was I remember what God has done in the past. If He saved me then, why am I scared? And that's how I was able to shift my faith towards the situation that no, there wasn't need to be scared. If it wasn't a function of prayer, because I didn't know we were crashing. So I wasn't shouting Jesus. I wasn't
like praying. You normally hear, even when there's normal turbulence, you hear Jesus, Allahu Akbar.
Exactly, everybody shouting whatsoever. But I wasn't doing anything because I was just smiling and laughing at people. So I didn't know He was crashing. So there was no iota of prayer. It wasn't an idea of it wasn't something I was praying against or something. So it was just pure act of God. So it became a stronghold to my life, even in situations I have faced.
Other situations in
life. When I had come across some situation. Most times I came across situation, and it's like, He looked up, how will you do it? Will you survive this with this thing? How will it work? But I have just looked. If God saved me then, without my permission, without me even asking for, then why am I scared that same God will not be able to intervene now that I am crying out or praying to Him to do something? So somehow it's becoming an anchor to my life. Because it was actually, what made it so massive was a year earlier, I lost my sister. And that's 2005 rather.
God rest her soul.
Yeah. So, and 2006, it was an accident, a motor accident. She died in a motor accident. And here, 2000, God did this. It's for me, it was massive because the impact on my family would have been something else. And so, if God saw all this and decided to rescue me, then it had become a guiding point for me. And so I was able to fly, and then I fly now without really having any of those issues.
Yeah, okay, you're a regular flyer now.
Yeah, I do.
Of course, I this will be a bit subjective. Are you confident that, I don't want to sound callous, should it happen, would you expect same type of response time from agencies of government, or are you more confident that this could be better?
Well, in the natural, you want to say...
in this is in the context of the general talk about safety on transportation in Nigeria, be it on road, air, and whatever. General safety, transportation safety in this country.
Generally, when you look at it, the level of infrastructure in Nigeria in respect to relatively to other countries developing, the gap is massive. So that has its impact on the results. The rate of accident generally in our travel, whether air, road, sea, is on the, when you also consider it, the response also it's on the same line because the infrastructure needed are not readily available. When that is the case, for example, you need to detect that a plane is off the course before you declare.
And there's sufficient technology to do that.
You need technology to be able to do that enough. And so sometimes it's not, there is that issue. So when you look at this whole thing, then how readily are we ready to respond to cases like that? That's the issue. So these are major things we have that are problem across the country generally. In the transportation industry, it's majorly the problem. Roads are not okay. Sometimes even you get to airport, some planes are. And so when we have all these even the state of planes are questionable. And so when we have all these, then of course, you would say in terms of rating, it's nothing too good. But however, when you look at as the transportation industry, air travel is still one of the savings, because accidents in terms of air travel,
in comparative terms,
yes. It's minimal. And
now we have a situation that currently government concession in airports. You just talked about the inadequacy of facilities. As a traveler, frequent air traveler, as a citizen who share the same concerns that other Nigerians do about transportation in the country, do you see the policy shift towards concessioning the airports in this country? The 4 major airports, Abuja, Lagos, Port Harcourt, and Kano, are being concessioned. What's your personal opinion about this?
Well, the issues are not often, the problem in the country is not about policies. We have some beautiful policies, beautiful ideas. So Nigerians are blessed with talented people, intelligent people. Creating idea policies are not majorly our problem. It is the drivers. Do we drive them to produce the result or the goals that was set from the beginning? The idea of it, man, is not anything unique that have not been seen before. But you see, to produce the result, it's what must be done. All hands must be on deck. The issue is the efficiency. You see, any policy in respect to this must produce the efficiency of the air travel. If it's not producing the efficiency, if it's not going to get better, then why do it? That's the issue. If it's going to go the way of NEPA, then there's no need. But that's the issue. But if we're going to do it, and it's going to be, we will drive it. There will be drivers, those who will drive the policy to produce the result that was stated from the beginning. Then that means obviously we'll get better. Things will be better. So it's not really the issue of policy. It's about whether we will drive it to produce the goals that was set from the onset.
Okay. We've looked briefly about the involvement of government, the state in this whole issue. Let's look at those who own the airlines. I mean, concession is for the airports. The airlines also have a role to play.
Massively.
When you travel between Lagos, Abuja, Ibadan, and Lagos and Abuja back and forth, in other climes, when situations that, like the one that occurred in which you were involved in 2006, the airlines have some compensatory arrangement.
Okay.
Thereafter,
Yeah.
did any of this play out in your own case?
Where?
I mean, the airports giving some bit of respite.
Yes, the airline did, but it took 6 years.
6 years?
Yes, 6 years. 2012, at the close of 2012 was when the response finally came in. Because there were issues. Although earlier, let me put it this way. For me, it took 6 years. I think for some other people, it took 4
The other
years.
7 who survived.
Yes, for some other people, it took, especially those who died, I think for most of them, it took about 3 to 4 years. Sure. But for my case, it took 6. I think about a few of us, if I was sure, because the final day we went to take the check. We were quite a number of us there, but I think about that rate, maybe less than 10, at least the ones I saw. Whether they were different timing, I don't know. But at the time, we were about that. So it took about 6 years for finally. I think there was court cases here that was also part here.
Initiated by the survivors or the relations of the survivors?
It's initiated by the airline. By the insurance company
against the airline.
Something that way. So it took quite a number of. It took a few years before finally the.
But there's been a closure.
No, there's been a closure. There's been a closure. As for at least to the best of my knowledge, by 2012 there was a closure because I was part of the last batch, and there was a closure.
Were you satisfied with the scope, the nature of the closure? I mean, not beyond money.
Okay, well, in a way, there are certain procedure to follow, generally, which has to, but by the time it's done, there's what to be paid. Majorly has to do with money. What's to be paid, the percentage. I think as then, if I was correct, I know that it was 100%. Then I think for those
100% of what?
Sorry, it was 50% for survivor of what ought to be paid. That's what I'm trying to remember. I think it was how many? There's an amount of dollars.
The bill was footed by the insurance provider or the airline itself?
I think for a part, there is a part that was taken care by the insurance, and I think another part was taken care by the airline. I think I fell into that category. So I think that was the issue.
Okay. Now, you see, why I'm asking this question is that nothing seemed to have changed in terms of the trauma people go through. And then the rigmarole of paperwork and procedures and bureaucracy, even in the context of that trauma and loss of life. As again a traveler, would you have preferred a simpler arrangement? This is a straightforward thing. There was an accident, lives were involved, people's situations were involved. Deal with it and move on. Why take 6 years?
Actually, I think a simpler way should have been. I guess that maybe some details were not properly, which also called into attention the need for the regulatory bodies to do a thorough work. Because I think part of the issue was that the insurance company was complaining on issue of when the insurance was done on something that way. I really didn't have the detail, but it seems it wasn't quite too long after, when there was a bit loophole here and there, and that's the reason why they went to court. Because if they feel they didn't have a case, they probably would not have gone to court that way. So that dragged a bit of it. But I think part of it is the regulatory bodies should do their work a lot more, so that there should be a procedure. If you are signing, if an insurance
less cumbersome, of course, straightforward and simple.
They should have a period between this and this. This should be settled. That way, any insurance who is taking that burden on,
itself.
Of itself, we know what to do. We know that, okay, in case of eventuality, this must be done within this. So we could get a lot of things working well and with proper policies.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Peter Onuka. It's good to be here talking with you. It must have been a very deep encounter, and here you are telling the story. Maybe it may sound belated, but I say congratulations.
Thank you so much.
I wish you the very best.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure, sir.
We've been talking with Mr. Peter Onuka. He's a life coach, an evangelist, and he actually survived a plane crash which left several others not so lucky to be alive today. 8 of them walked out of that plane crash that happened in 2006 October, just in the outskirts of Abuja. Thank you very much again for sharing this experience with us.
It's a pleasure.
And that's it on Exclusive Interview on AD4 TV Radio. Thanks for being with us.